Have you ever wondered what it really takes to make Agile work? Well, at the Global Agile Summit, we're bringing you real-life, first-person stories of Agile succeeding out there in the real world that will inspire you to take action. Whether you're a leader, a product innovator, a developer, you'll hear practical insights from those who've done it. They'll be telling their own stories from the stage. I'll tell you more about this at the end of this episode, so stay back and listen to the full detailed description of what we have in store for you at the Global Agile Summit. But if you can't wait, you can go right now to globalagilesummit.com and check out our full schedule. For now, on to the episode, but I'll see you at the end of this episode with more details on the Global Agile Summit. Talk to you soon. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a bonus episode. And for this bonus episode, we're talking about measuring the transformation in software organizations with Mooly Beeri. Hey, Mooly, welcome to the show.
Hi, Vasco. Thanks for hosting me.
Absolutely. So I found Mooly's work and I was really intrigued by his approach to measuring the progress in software organizations, specifically towards a better way of working. Of course, he talks a lot about continuous improvement. So when we talk about this software transformation, he's been working in industry for 30 plus years at this point, and he's the founder and CEO of bettersoftware.dev. He developed a practical and visual approach to measure the improvements in technology organizations, and he's worked at Microsoft, with Philips, with Aptiv, stories that he shares publicly. And his data-driven approach really helps organizations visualize and optimize the entire software development life cycle, with concrete aspects that are, of course, discussed in his model, as well as with a very, in my opinion, compelling visual representation. So, Mooly, let's start. So you've worked with companies like Philips and Aptiv. Can you share a specific example of the visualization aspect of the transformation, the improvement, the continuous improvement in technology organizations?
Yeah, sure. So maybe we can start with a short story about Philips. When many years ago, I was asked to build the first software center of excellence for Philips. And at the time, Philips was built from many different acquisitions. And as many of them came with different technologies and different tech stacks and different cultures of development and so on, it became very difficult at the management level to understand what the status is of software craftsmanship across the company and how well software is being done in each part of the company. And even the simplest question is, where are we great at automation? Where should we copy best practices? That became quite difficult to respond. So what we developed, and you spoke about visualization, is a way to look at the entire software development lifecycle, really end-to-end. Many quality initiatives focus on coding, but we're looking at the software development lifecycle end-to-end, starting from requirements, then into analysis and architecture and design, and then coding and testing and CI/CD and deploying and customer support. So really end-to-end. And to each of these steps in the software development lifecycle, we attach an effectiveness index, if you will, on a grade scale. And what you get is a heat map where every team understands how effective it is across the entire lifecycle. So one team can easily see that they have some issue around automation. Another team has an issue around code reviews. One other team has issues around the CI/CD and so on. So once you think about the volume of things a proper software team has to do to ship high quality software, it's very difficult to understand which parts are done properly and which parts need improvement. And so if it's hard to imagine a visualization framework in a podcast, but if you imagine a heat map where every part of the practice gets a red, green, yellow indication, then at a single glance, you can look at the team and understand whether this team needs some help on implementation or on design or on testing and so on.
Absolutely. The aspect of the heat map is actually rather interesting because depending on how we lay out the information, you can actually pinpoint the areas of the organization where more support is needed and therefore justify more investment into that particular area of the organization. As I was looking at your heat map when you were presenting that, the immediate idea that I got was, hey, for sufficiently larger organizations, of course, for small organizations, you may not need this level of complexity, but for sufficiently larger organizations, you can overlay the heat map on the different countries, whether it is the whole globe or just 2 countries, whatever, and you can actually find where do I need to put more emphasis, right? Like where do I need to bring, I don't know, somebody to talk about TDD or somebody to help the teams work on the CI/CD pipeline, or somebody to work with the product owners to improve the way requirements are, documented and followed up on, and so on. And it really helped me kind of imagine how we could use this as an information radiator for leadership to then decide where to, allocate the investment that they have, but of course need to prioritize for improvements in the organization.
Yeah, I think there are many ways of using, and I've seen many ways of using this data. Think about a proper management team that is trying to drive agile mindset, and everyone wants to improve. And so imagine a good retrospective where everyone comes in with their plans to improve. One team wants additional funding for automation, another wants funding for a different tool, another wants to rewrite a certain part of the infrastructure, another wants to replace the CI/CD infrastructure, and so on. And you, as the manager, it's very difficult to decide which one of those is a proper investment, which part of the organization is already at a good enough level, and which part needs help. And furthermore, you have 5, 10 teams under your responsibility. Maybe one of them is already very good at test automation, and all you need to do is borrow the test architect from that team and have them run for an iteration in the other team. So these are all discussions that today happen at a very intuitive level. Okay, it's more or less the person who has the most convincing power at the retrospective or closest to the budget or the manager's ear will get the approval to invest in their specific improvement. And I think we've seen many cases where teams go into rewrites and they go into replacing tools and so on, and no one really understands the rationale behind that, because there are many other areas which are more burning in terms of the need to improve. So I've seen this visualization used in, I spoke about Philips earlier, but maybe I can speak about Aptiv, which is a large automotive company. So a dashboard describing the entire software landscape of Aptiv was presented on a monthly basis to the CTO of the company. And this is a $20 billion company, so the CTO doesn't have daily touch with every team and can't really say which team is doing well or not, but they trust the effectiveness index. And so they look at this heat map and they say, well, we see teams here that are improving. We see teams here that are struggling on dynamic analysis, are struggling around on automation. We need to fix that. And so let's put a specific effort to fix that for the next review or the next iteration and so on. And it also gives high-level management, where they are not exactly software experts, it gives them the ability to quantify how effective their teams are. So they can say, well, I trust this index, and so this team is 50% effective, and I want them to be 60% effective. And so please, team, here is the index. Go and rise up your effectiveness towards the next year or the next iteration, and so on. And so it becomes almost like an internal language, and everyone can use, which allows the teams, on the one hand, to improve their effectiveness in any way they see fit, but on the other hand, gives management a way of monitoring the entire process and actually proving to themselves that it's actually working.
Yeah, and the visualization creates that internal language of improvement. Of course, the whole set of things that we choose to be in the model we're using will also affect that. But the visualization does help. One of the aspects that you mentioned was this kind of even intuitive discussion about what needs to be improved next, right? Like, and I know you have a great example about the quality of code reviews, which sometimes gets discussed. Hey, code reviews take too long, or we don't get enough information, or we don't have enough people available to do whatever the improvement might be, right? Like, people complain about it, but they don't have a concrete and disciplined way to go about checking that it is actually being improved. And I know you have a great story. So can you give us that example of how this team was able to effectively focus on how to improve the code reviews and actually measure the progress of that improvement?
Yeah, sure. The code review is an interesting example, because if you ask any team, are you doing code reviews? Almost everyone will religiously say, sure, of course, we have to do code reviews. It's mandatory. We do it for every change. We are very passionate about code reviews. And so then if you ask a team, how well are your code reviews done? The conversation kind of shuts down, and some people will say, well, we think it's okay, but we don't really know. And the story that I wanted to share started when there was an initiative. Someone was at a conference and came back with an initiative to double the time that we invest in code reviews. Okay, they heard somewhere, they read somewhere that this is great practice. It will immediately find many more issues and make the code quality great. Double the time that's invested in code reviews. And the problem was no one was able to quantify whether this is a good investment or not. It sounds okay, but if you do it, and let's assume you've done it for an iteration, how do you prove that this is actually a good investment? And why not quadruple the time spent in code reviews? There's no data behind that discussion. And so we came up with the concept of measuring code review escapes, which is basically an exercise every team we work with is doing at the end of every iteration. You take a sample, a subset of the defects found in the iteration, and you gather the team together and you ask for each of these defects only one question. Could we have found this defect if we did a better code review? That's it. And if the answer is yes, we could have found it if we did a better code review, then this is a code review escape, which means this is something that should have been identified in a code review and wasn't. And that, of course, needs to lead to some improvement in your code review process. If you say 3 out of 10 defects could have been found if we did a better code review, you have a 30% code review escape. And now, whatever actions you take, you can double the time you want to invest in code reviews. That's fine. At the end of the iteration, measure that code review escape ratio again. If it's still 30%, doubling the time didn't help. If it's now 20%, okay, now you can calculate an investment and benefit ratio. So this led to this concept of measuring code review escapes, and now we have the same concept around requirement escapes and design escapes and architecture escapes. And every time we go into discussion of we want to improve something, it's based on measuring what are the number of issues that escaped that specific phase in the software development lifecycle. And so we are able to consciously decide whether we need to do more on code reviews, or maybe this is already good enough.
What I really like about this story is how first, let's invest that double the time in code reviews, but let's measure it. right? How would we measure it, right? Just asking that question is already very productive because, of course, we know what better code reviews mean, but we do need to go through the trouble of defining that clearly, measuring it, and I think that's the most important, be accountable to ourselves and also learn from the process, right? Because, let's say that we did double the time in code reviews, but maybe we got a 5% improvement in code review escapes. Is it worth it? Right? We can ask that question, and that's a very important question. Now, of course, the challenge here, and this is a challenge also that I'm sure you have faced, the challenge here is that we might fall into this idea of top-down improvement mandates, right? You shall improve your code reviews by 5%. How does the shift, how does your method, instead of focusing on these top-down improvement requests, which traditionally we know don't work very well, except in very specific organizations that invest a lot in internal auditing. How does your system help to not just make the improvement visible, not just make it measurable, but also shift the accountability to the teams so that they keep themselves accountable, and also that they take advantage of learning that the process would give you while keeping that organizational alignment that usually top-down mandates are there to give?
Yeah, that's really a nice challenge to solve. Maybe I can start responding first by telling you a short story from my time in Microsoft, where we had one very senior VP of engineering that was really into unit testing. He thought unit testing is the solution to all of the world problems. And so there came one day a directive that everyone needs to move their unit test coverage up from, I think it was that time, 70% to 80%. And everyone, regardless of how good the code was, how proficient the team was, everyone needs to invest the time to up their code review, code coverage metrics. And that is an example, on the one hand, of someone who is knowledgeable somewhere up the management chain, but on the other hand, a top-down directive that is not relevant to many teams, because some teams, the main problem is not the unit test coverage. And so with our approach, what we basically try to agree on is the definition of effectiveness through our effectiveness index. And this effectiveness is a composite of this. We have 35 competencies derived from the software development lifecycle, all the way from, as I said earlier, from requirements to deployment. And so the overall effectiveness is sum of your different parts of effectiveness. And so when we say to a team, your effectiveness is now at 40% out of 100, they have many different ways of moving this up the scale. They can move it to being more effective. Some teams, for instance, they don't have easy access to the live production environments. It's expensive equipment, it's changing too often, and so on. For those teams, maybe it makes much more sense to invest in unit testing. Some other teams, most of their issues come when they integrate into a larger system, and for them, maybe integration testing and functionality testing is a much more sensible investment. And so they can choose to stay very basic in their effectiveness on unit test, but make it extremely effective on integration test and functionality test. From the team's point of view, they are doing the proper effort and they're investing in the right thing for them. From management point of view, it's a win-win because the team is improving on the effectiveness index. They are getting better quantifiably. They're generating less defects, delivering faster to market, higher quality, and so on. And so it's basically a win-win. The team gets to define their own path based on what makes sense for them. And management can see that the overall effectiveness of the organization is growing.
Okay, so I need to ask this follow-up question because obviously,
Sure.
improvement of effectiveness is, as you describe it, opening the door for teams to decide, where should we invest? What are the areas that we as a single team need to focus on? But it's very tempting for management to still say, hey, but I want everybody to improve test-driven development or unit testing or customer interviews or whatever, like that manager you described a moment ago did. So how do you work with organizations to try to open up that possibility, right? To really delegate, but also shift the accountability to the teams on what to improve? Like, how does that happen in practice? I'm sure you've had difficult conversations on that topic with the people that you've worked with.
Yeah, so I think the example I gave from Microsoft is actually the more rare example, because I've done an initial scan of the full organization in Philips. That was 2015 or 2016, I don't remember. And then I presented the outcome to the CTO of Philips at that time. And they were not a software expert, but he saw that the effectiveness of the full organization is, let's pick a random number, 60. And he asked only two questions. He said, everyone, do you agree this is a good way to describe your effectiveness? And the teams under review said, yes, this is a proper way of describing our effectiveness. And then he said, okay, so if you agree your effectiveness is now 50 or 60, let's go into a 3-year program of moving up the effectiveness scale 10 points every year. Every team, define your own path. I don't care. I don't care if you're currently at 50%, which is low. So you have to be better. Now, between you and me, when you get to 80% effectiveness and you want to take it to 90, there aren't 1,000 ways of doing that because you're already very good at many things. So you have to improve the last remaining points. But when you move from 40, 50, 60% effectiveness, there are many ways of doing that. Maybe I'll take an example. Let's assume you are an Olympic athlete, okay, and you want to improve your fitness. There are probably few ways to do that. But if you are a couch potato and you don't move a lot and you want to get in shape, it doesn't matter if you walk 3 days for half an hour every day, or if you go swim, or if you bike, or you golf or play tennis. It doesn't matter. Each of these will make you in better shape. And so I think this actually takes a load off upper management, because if they focus on one thing, they have to also be sure that this is the right thing to move the organization. And very often they don't really know what's holding back the organization. And so they can say, well, I have this external independent view that says you are only 50% effective. Well, just work on it and become 60% effective, 70% effective. And then let's see where our issues still remain.
Yeah, I remember I interviewed David Marquet a long time ago here on the podcast, and he shares a story of how they're in an exercise. He was the commander of a submarine, and they are in an exercise, and he gives an order to the person controlling the machinery and says basically the same or equivalent to saying, hey, let's move to fourth gear. And then the person in control of the ship says, sir, this ship does not have a fourth gear, sir. And this is, I think, is a beautiful example of the fallibility of management, right? Like, management might have the right intention, the right direction, but they don't necessarily know what is the detailed action to take in every specific team. And that's also one of the things I really like about the model that you present, which is the idea that, you have this menu of things that are considered important for software teams to be effective. And then the teams themselves, in their context, acknowledge what is it that they need to improve next. And I think that just the list of items is a great tool for a retrospective, right? Like, the team can self-grade in all of those items and start from there. Now, of course, when we do it at the level of the organization, it gives us the ability and the benefit that we might see systemic problems that the teams cannot see because they only see their own context. And I think that the visualization we discussed at the top of the show is a very important aspect of that.
Yeah, just one point about the list of topics. I didn't mention that before, but the list of topics that we measure is derived from an ISO standard for software development lifecycle. And so it's supposed to cover everything that a software team needs to do. But as to context, when I developed that, I needed to grade different teams. Remember, in the Philips case, so Philips had teams building software that goes into espresso machines, and teams that build software that manage entire hospitals or run MRI scanners or CT scanners. And so very different type of software. And of course, for every different type of software, there is a different consideration of what's important, what's more critical, what are the critical components. And so this framework really allows every team to define for itself what's important, and still allows top management to drive the mindset of continuous improvement and measure that the organization is indeed improving in some fixed rate. And the top management can prescribe the rate of improvement. I've had customers where the management says, we think we're more or less okay. Let's try to move up the effectiveness ladder slowly, 5 points a year. That's fine. In some places, I've had teams say we need to move 10 to 15 points of effectiveness every year and invest more. So this is where management can weigh in terms of the investment, the attention to improvement, but still every team defines their own software improvement plan, and they are the ones driving it. But they, of course, have to demonstrate the heightened effectiveness.
Yeah. And another aspect that you just kind of mentioned in your talk about the Philips case is that, of course, you work with many different teams, but also many different industries. And here in the podcast, the question that is really interesting for everyone listening, I'm sure, is, okay, but how do you connect the studies and the improvement follow-ups that you have done with patterns of successful agile adoption across this diverse contexts? Pardon.
Yeah, so I've worked a lot in healthcare with Philips and Roche, and then a lot in automotive with Ambition and ZF and Harman and Aptiv, of course, for many years. And at the end of the day, the differences are not that great, right? Of course, every software team believes they are unique, and to a certain extent they are, but we all have the same profession. If you ignore for a second the features and the specific industry context, then everyone goes through the same pain. Understand the requirements and try to make sure they really reflect what the customer needs. Convert them into some design which will be resilient to future changes. Write some code, test it, and so on. Now, of course, there are slight variations. Some industries are more into code generation and some more into integrating third-party products. Some are slower to release, some are faster to release. But the birth of this framework was from an environment where Philips was so diverse that it had to accommodate very different types of software. So we had to keep it flexible enough for every team to define their critical components. And for instance, when we measure the effectiveness of dynamic analysis is about measuring behavior in runtime, okay? But whether you measure CPU usage or resource usage or whatever, that really depends on your context. And so when we work with the team around dynamic analysis, we ask them to define what are the components they want to monitor in real time. And then these have to be monitored and properly acted upon and so on. But the team is the one responsible for defining the context and defining also the urgency. If you're working in as part of a team that is responsible for releasing some parts of a CT scanner, and you release once every 4 years, continuous integration has a different meaning for you than it has for someone who is releasing a new update every 24 hours. So the flexibility is there. It's up to the team to define the critical to success components, but it's not up to the team to prove that they are becoming more effective as they work.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that is really interesting from what you just shared is that once we realize that this is like the model that you are working on is kind of a process of evaluation, measurement, and follow-up for continuous improvement, we can easily start seeing other aspects that might be coming in. Now, of course, you based your model in the SDLC or software development lifecycle, but we as Agilists, we can bring in perspectives to the same model that reflect our contextual reality, right, the company we're in, but also the need to adopt Agile in certain aspects. For example, time to release or time to respond to customer requests or availability of product owners or all of that stuff. So what I'm thinking is, and I would like to hear your thoughts, Mooly, what I'm thinking is that we as a community can also contribute to that model to try to represent the same style of high-level components of the model, but that also represent a perspective on how the organization works rather than how the software gets developed only. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from, and I can understand your thought process. I'm a software guy and have been my entire life. But if we zoom out for a second, the nature of Agile is a mindset of continuous improvement, and that's fine. We agree, and I think there is a large community promoting continuous improvement. But I think where we see a lot of issues is around, fine, we understand we need to improve, but where to improve, by how much, and is that specific improvement the right thing to do now? And so trying to quantify the investment is for me a very basic requirement in any improvement effort. And this framework is definitely flexible enough to also accommodate other domains. It needs to have the domain expert that can plug in the rationale into it. But essentially, if you're trying to make the team do a better daily scrum, okay? Even saying these words, this needs to be based on some proof that your daily scrum is not working. And so here comes the question, what do you use to measure the effectiveness of the daily scrum? Is it the attendance? Is it the number of features delivered? Is it the number of rejects at the end of the sprint? Whatever it is, and I'm really not the expert on that, you can't ask a team to improve their daily scrum without showing some quantitative evidence that it needs to improve, and then being able to measure it at the end of the next iteration and show that it has improved. So to that extent, I think this type of discussion, the way I sometimes call our framework is we are supercharging Agile with the quantitative data, which helps the discussions. I'm sure many of your listeners have faced the frustration of trying to convince the team to do a better daily scrum, and the team is saying, well, we think it's okay. we think it's going well. Look, everyone's coming, everyone's talking. And so we think it's okay. And to break through that, you need a metric. You need something to be able to show the team if it's working well or not, and also show the team the side effects of not improving.
Absolutely. That's a great point, right? There are some trends within the Agile community. For example, evidence-based management is one trend that has started there. But I think that plugging some of those things into the model that you have would help us to also get a holistic view of the organization. And of course, we can only start where we are, right? Like if we're the CTO of an organization, we can go and look at the whole organization. If we're a tech lead or a QA lead or a Scrum Master in a team, then we need to start in our team. And the best time to start continuously improving was 10 years ago, and the next best time is today. So let's get started with the continuous improvement. Mooly, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. If people want to know more about you and the work that you're doing, where should they go?
Well, the best place to go is to go on our website to betasoftware.dev and look up what we're doing and some case studies, and also reach out to me directly. You can find me through my LinkedIn page or the different ways. But basically, go through our website, reach out, and we are also, don't want to do too much promotional, but the way we work is that every team that is interested can do a proof of concept, but basically for free, just to try out the framework. And I think many of the aspects of this framework can be developed by every team on their own. And we do have several cases where teams have done a proof of concept and they said, well, we understand this makes a lot of sense. We will take it from here. So we really invite people to experiment, try it out, and I agree with you that teams should just start. I think today, maybe other than I wouldn't say they need to start improving. I think everyone is maybe improving too many things, too much at the same time, without really measuring what gets improved and what is already good enough. And so I would say start taking the improvements under a controlled view and really understand where you need to invest and where are the organization's weak points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other aspect, right? When we go across teams, we can look at the organization rather than just our team and how it is doing. We'll put the link in the show notes, bettersoftware.dev. So everybody be sure to check it out. And there's a few videos that Mooly has available also on the website if you want to know more and dive into deeper details. Mooly, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you for hosting me. This was a good experience for me.
Hey friend, thank you for staying. Here is all you need to know about the Global Agile Summit. If you've ever suffered or know people who are suffering from Agile fatigue, this event is for you. Agile fatigue is that feeling that settles in when we can't really see a light at the end of the tunnel. We get discouraged, especially when conversations revolve around the same old frameworks, the same old buzzwords and theories. We don't feel that energy anymore. Well, the Global Agile Summit is a different kind of event. We're bringing you real-life first-person stories of Agile succeeding out there in the real world that will inspire you to take action and transform the way you work. The Global Agile Summit will happen in Tallinn, Estonia, May 18th, that's the workshop day, and then 19th and 20th, the conference day. And Tallinn, Estonia is one of the most innovative tech hubs in Europe. The Global Agile Summit is hosted together with Latitude 59, which is kind of a citywide celebration of software startups and groundbreaking ideas. And we'll have a shared ticket for you to attend those events as well. So who will be speaking? Well, we've got an incredible lineup of thought leaders in software and Agile, For example, Clinton Keith, the person who literally wrote the book on game development with Scrum, and is busy bringing Agile to the world of game development. You must check his session. The very famous and well-known Jürgen Apelo, author of Management 3.0, will be talking and exploring about AI's impact on leadership. We also have Gojko Adzic, who's taking an unconventional look at the product growth with his lizard optimization keynote. Other speakers include, for example, Sven Dietz, who's challenging everything we know about software development by literally ditching contracts and estimates. Can you imagine? His teams deliver software before their competitors are even done with the contract negotiation. How agile is that? But there's more. We'll cover engineering practices in our developer track with talks on, for example, AI-assisted test-driven development, developing products in minutes with a different approach to how we develop, configure, deploy platforms, and much more. We also have a product track where we cover cutting-edge ideas around product discovery, delighting customers with product delight frameworks. We'll have a talk about that. And we also have an agile business track where we will talk about, for example, open strategy, a very agile approach to managing organizations and delivering software faster to clients, faster than you can even write a contract, literally. I mean, I already told you about Sven Dietz's story. It's amazing. It definitely is a must-see. I'm sure you'll be inspired and get a lot of ideas for your own software projects and software delivery. Now, whether you're a business leader, a product innovator, or a developer, you'll definitely find value in our 3 focused tracks. That's Agile Business for those working with businesses and organizations, Agile Product for product managers, product owners, and innovators, and Agile Developer for the builders making Agile work in practice, the coders, the testers, the designers, the producers, the Scrum Masters, you name it. If you join, you will meet over 200 Agile professionals from all over the world. People who, just like you, want to grow, want to share, and want to learn by challenging the ideas that don't work anymore. At the Global Agile Summit, you'll get new connections, fresh ideas, and the energy to take your own Agile to the next level. And who knows, maybe even find your next career opportunity. So don't miss out. Check out the full program and grab your ticket now at globalagilesummit.com. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in Tallinn, Estonia in May. I'll see you there.